And expanding from rurality, I would like to discuss about some topics that we touched earlier, which were sustainability, but also the future of work, which is part of our constant discussions. And the best man to talk about these topics, I think, is a design activist, I would call, and writer, Alastair. So we're really happy to have you here.
Thank you, Vasilis. Can I ask you to do the next? Because I'm going to walk and talk. I just wait for the first slide to come up. But can I thank Miguel and Anna for their talk? I think that I'm coming from a more theoretical position, perhaps. I'm also showing a lot of different kinds of practices. And the phrase that the light is the people in the village, I would also say that the light is the people in any project. And I think we should be wise to remember that. I also like the fact that you irritated the politicians. Of course, when we create something successful and the politicians aren't there, you create another kind of politics. And that's what you were doing. So I kick off. First of all, there's a lot of language in this, but we've agreed with Vanessa that we put the talk up on the website. It's open. You can read the PDF. There's one big story, and there's lots of little stories. It's based, Imaginaries of Positive Disruption. If we don't disrupt now, when? We really have to disrupt now. A lot's happened, as we heard earlier, even in this building. Design and art-based practices towards viable socio-ecological worlds. It also involves economy too, but it's more important we use those two words, socio-ecological. Next, please. This talk's based loosely on these three books, and I'm going to pass them to the audience. And what I'd like you to do is to just browse the book and then just pass it over your head. Okay? This one here, this yellow one in the middle, and the orange one to the left there. So have a flick through, pass it through. I write to try and understand the world. I think that's, and I practice to try and understand the world, and I try and join the writing with the practice. So let's move on next, please. This first little book going down this side came out of the Porto Design Biennale, where I was general curator. And it's called Alter Realities. I just leave it there. Okay, next. This is Field Explorations, Design and Art-Based Practices Towards Viable Agriculture. And you see, agriculture's got a hyphen, because I believe just like your village, it has a culture. It's a village culture. You can have one without the other. And every kind of agriculture has a culture. Even agribusiness has a culture. The little farmers where I live up in the Minu area, they have a culture. And this project here is a very interesting one. It's led by Amy Franceschini from Future Farmers, a collective been running for 20 years. Future Farmers, you notice the name. They went around the Abruzzo in Italy, taking this wooden Trojan horse, and they collected knowledge. And I'm going to refer to knowledge many times through this talk. But what kind of knowledge did they collect? What kind of knowledge do we respect in society? Sometimes we get a little bit too focused on certain kinds of knowledge. But even in your project, in your village, you needed many kinds of knowledge. And you were hybridizing knowledge. Next. And this book also emerged from the Biennale. We had a series of colloquia online and in presence called Peripheral Perspectives. And I asked all the contributors to then send some written material in. And I was going to do proceedings, but I thought, no, there's a book here. As you'll see, it's full of holes. But I don't think the theories are full of holes, nor the practices. So this came out of it, and we proposed this concept of post-normal design. We have this trend, don't we? Postmodernism, post. So it's a provocation, of course, because you have to ask, what is normal design? Normal design supports the neoliberal economy. It's as simple as that. Normal design supports the global economy. So post-normal design does different things. but we can only find out when we do it together. I've been using participatory design, co-design, 15, 20 years now, and the participation of people, as Anna and Miguel know, is absolutely critical, because participation is also ownership, and participation is commitment. Next. So I have 3 propositions tonight. I'm going to go through them very quickly. 1, capitalocentric thinking. 2, I'm going to try and reorientate you. And 3, I'm going to show lots of examples of how designers and artists and those that work with them materialize worlds differently. Notice it's plural, worlds. It's not one world, it's many worlds. And that's also our problem today. We talk about the world, the global economy. We should talk about multiple economies and local economies. So, capitalocentric thinking. Next, thank you. My proposition here is that we had a break with nature. There's a wonderful painting, 2 paintings by Albrecht Dürer, 1503, 1506. He painted topics that every citizen of the European Union, which didn't exist then, Europe, every citizen knew these things. They had intimate contact with these things. Next. We've had 5 agricultural revolutions. Maybe the back you can't see, so please do visit the PDF on the website. We come all this way through, but the critical one, where I argue we had this great separation. When we as humans separated from nature, Renaissance, I don't know, but I also think it was to do with European settlerism and colonialism. We exported a form of repressive agriculture. And this is where I believe our separation from nature began. We've also had 4 industrial revolutions. Every time we have a revolution, it's technologically based and economically based. It's rarely based on social and ecological considerations. Next. So we're in the Anthropocene. But I might just say one comment about the Anthropocene. Not every human has contributed to the Anthropocene. Some humans have contributed a lot more. But there's 2 other phrases I want to introduce you to. The Capitalocene and the Plantationocene. Because these scenes, this way of thinking about what's happened to our world, our geology, is very critical. Next slide, please. The Capitalocene, a book by Jason Moore, is a multi-species assemblage, a world ecology of capital, power, and nature. The Plantationocene, I'll just read it out. This was a definition by Donna Haraway and Anna Singh and a lot of other anthropologists. The Plantationocene, the devastating transformation of diverse kinds of human-tended farms, pastures, and forests into extractive enclosed plantations, relying on slave labor and other forms of exploited, alienated, and usually spatially transported labor. There are still plantations today. Maybe not under the conditions of slavery, but indentured labor or precarious labor, they still exist. So remember the Capitalocene and Plantationocene. Next, please. This is the result of that kind of thinking. This is a soybean warehouse. And I ask, does this monoculture represent ecocide, or what the anthropologist Arturo Escobar calls terricide? For me, as a former ecologist, it does. This way of producing kills everything except soybeans. Thanks. We rely to our world, everything we function with, all the digital gadgets we all have, relies on extractivism. This is a big hole in Spain, Rio Tinto Zinc, a multi-global transnational company. It's a huge hole. You see the size of the mature trees. Next. And we have new forms of extractivism. Maybe in the conference program there's a word non-urban. Maybe this is non-urban. It's the Tesla factory in the middle of nowhere. All the employees have to drive there from somewhere. Next. So this is not sustainable. This is an elitist product for the rich. And Elon Musk, well, enough said. Next. And of course, even here in Portugal, where lithium exists, there's a big debate about whether licenses are given for lithium or not. Extractivism. Next. Kate Crawford wrote a book to say that artificial intelligence, this is maybe where the network comes into, is the emerging extractive industry of the 21st century. It's neither artificial nor intelligent. It's a grand infrastructure project, a registry of power. Think about it. During COVID, who got rich? Next. And there's new classes of power here. This is from Mackenzie Walk's book, Capital is Dead. 7 classes on the left, he's citing Guy Standing. The plutocracy class, the salariat, the proficients, I guess that's me, professional and technical. I guess that's a lot of you, professional and technical. Working class, precariat, unemployed, lumpen precariat. And on the right, vectoralist. We could say Jeff Bezos is a vectoralist. What does a vectoralist do? A vectoralist controls how the information is gathered and what's done with it and where it's directed. Jeff Bezos saw you don't have to own a factory today. That's 19th century thinking. You have to control the orders and send them out to other people's factories. That's a vectoralist. Hackers, rentiers. We know about rentiers in Airbnb. Porto City's experienced it, right? And CEOs. So think about these new classes. Where do they fit into your networks? Where do they fit with the idea of exchanging knowledge? Will they exchange their knowledge? I'm not so sure. Next. So we have social injustice. Next. We have the 6th great mass extinction. I told you I was an ecologist before. In my lifetime, common birds in the UK have been put on the about to be extinct list. In my lifetime. So I do believe in the 6th great extinction. Next. We've also had loss of language. This is a map of local languages which have been lost in Europe. Why is that important? Because language is how we talk about the world. Here we are using English today. Desculpa para todos os portugueses. Here we are using English, but there are 5,500 languages in the world. And every time we lose one, we lose another opportunity to think about knowledge differently. Next. And we've got a warming Europe here. Hotspots, Madrid, Lisbon, and surprisingly, Galicia. And Eastern Europe. Wow. This is all recorded data made available through the EU and graphically produced. So, that's the capitalist-centric thinking, and that's what it's done. How can we reorientate? I think reorientation, good. How do we reorientate? It's not easy. It took your village 40, 50 years, maybe last 10, to really find a way to reorientate that village. But you're caught up too in global and regional and national trends. You're not independent. It's a network. Thanks. So I propose many models. It's a way of my thinking too. This is what I call the diversity triangle. In the middle, we have multi-species diversity. We cannot accept the binary of human and other than human, human and nature. This is completely a false way of thinking about our existence. Inside us, we have many other than humans. Otherwise, we couldn't function. Outside of us, we have many more other than human, beyond human. So let's think about our, whoops, just back one, sorry. Let's think about our agrodiversity, our anthro-diversity, and our biodiversity. And where they cross over, that's where maybe you should all be focusing. What are the opportunities in these crossover areas? Maybe this language is all very confusing, but I really think that if we don't think about diversity every minute of our professional lives, we're not really doing anything very useful. Next. So we need to think about the future cone. We want a preferable life, but we have to balance these spheres. Next. We have had past examples, modes of what I might call regenerative design. They've been tried, they've been experimented, but they didn't really scale up. Those modes, permaculture, agroecology, urban agriculture, eco-villages. Some of the eco-villages are 40, 50 years old. Greece, northern Scotland, and people still live in them. They're communities, of course. And ecological design, but it's not scaled up. So here's a question for you. What's your role in scaling up diversity? No answer needed right now. It's a big question. Next. We have to think differently with our economics. This is Donut Economics, the book by Kate Raworth. Remember the donut, a hole in the middle. So don't fall in the hole in the middle, because that means you've fallen out of society. You're one of the precariat, the lumpen precariat. You've really fallen out. And don't go on the outside of the donut, because you're damaging the very planet you live on. So stay in the donut. Kate Raworth has a spread in her book. She shows all the conventional economic diagrams, you know, all those graphs of growth, growth, growth. Then she shows her alternative diagrams on the right. And she simply says, economists need new diagrams in their head. I like it. So simple, so direct. Remember the donut. Next. Remember the iceberg. This is the work of Gibson Graham over many, many years. The top part, the bit of ice, is the normal economy. It's what the politicians talk about. The bit underneath is all the stuff we do every day that's never measured in the economy. All the things that happen in your village, like people caring for each other, doing each other's washing, painting each other's walls, it's not measured in the economy. And by the way, if we use limestone, it's probably also not measured in the economy. The paint is, but the lime is not. So remember the iceberg model. Next. And I come to this very important point. And again, I ask you, what is your role here? Because you're networking, which means you're already exchanging. You're in an exchange network. So how do you exchange knowledge? We have theoretical knowledge. We have procedural or practical knowledge. We have experiential embodied knowledge. And I put those all together. Essentially, there are two forms of knowledge, for me anyway. We have encultured knowledge. That is knowledge we learn through our culture, whatever that is. And we have tacit knowledge. Even as I touch the table, I have tacit knowledge. We have tacit knowledge about the air in this. We are tacit beings. Next. And we have situated knowing. Again, this is a situation. We're all experiencing something, and we're all knowing something. Whether it turns into knowledge or not, maybe that's for others to say. So ask yourself again too, what kind of knowledge are you really handling every day? And could you bring in other people with different forms of knowledge? Because when you do, you get something called an ontological disturbance. When we meet people that come from very different knowledge cultures, two things can happen. One, we have no idea what they're talking about. Or two, we get a sense that they know something we don't. Often it's just one of the two. Next. So, last part of my talk, I'll do it very quick, so we're going to have a conversation afterwards. Materializing plural worlds. I do believe your village has shown plural ways to reinvigorate the village, using artists in the way they think and practice with others. So, how do we materialize plural worlds? I'm going to skip this a little bit, but I'm proposing another term, not capitalocene, not plantationocene, not anthropocene, but sympoocene. Sympoesis is when we make things together, when we make things together. The we is not just human. The we is also all the other living things and the non-living things. This is the sympoocene. Okay, next. And we need to do regenerative design. You don't even have to read the definition. Next, regenerative design. If it doesn't regenerate, don't design it. As part of the Biennale, we had a project called the Museum of Vibrant Matter. And as part of that, we had this open archive called the Archive of Vibrant Matter. And citizens were able to submit samples of materials or objects and able to classify them on a open source typology. And this is one of the criteria we had about movement. Is the material hyperlocal, local? Is it an immigrant material, an emigrant material, a transient material, or is it omnipresent? An omnipresent material, dead mobile phones. They're all over the world. Microplastics. So we were trying to challenge people to think about materiality different. Again, you handle materials. You handle a lot of energy too, I think. So what kind of materials are you handling? Next. Where I worked in Bolzano in Alto Adige in the northeast of Italy, South Tyrol. At the university there, we did a lot of cradle-to-cradle stuff around biological materials. There's no need to have waste. I think there are languages in the world that don't actually have the word waste. It's a modern word. So, no waste. Next. And this is what we teach on the Masters in Eco-Social Design there. As students involved with communities, for instance, this hemp carpet was made with a community of people with disabilities. This was a composting toilet, and so on. This is about teaching people about eco-feminist values. Next. I bring another idea from Sasha Constanza Schock, this idea of design justice. And again, I'm not going to read the whole definition, but go on the PDF. But maybe I will just read this bit. Design justice is a growing community of practice that aims to ensure a more equitable distribution of design's benefits and burdens. Many designers are doing work, in my opinion, where they create burdens, they create benefits for the consumers, and in doing so they create burdens for someone else. This doesn't seem fair. So, how do you apply justice in your work? You notice I'm asking you a lot of questions. I haven't got all the answers to those questions either, but they are the kind of questions I ask myself. Next. So some examples. This is community production in the Valley of Trentino. Comunità Frizzante. They go out with local people foraging in the countryside and they make seasonal drinks. Next. This was a master's project set up by Micah Holnacker. She lived with farmers. She recorded their thoughts and activities, especially the farmers that were trying to do new things. And she set up a podcast and a local internet radio station for them. So this is about communication. Next. This is L'Atelier Paysan. This is farmers who open source their ideas for new machinery. Many of these farmers are biological or organic farmers. So they share their new designs for equipment because you cannot buy certain equipment on the market. You have to make it yourself. Farmers have a great tradition of making their own equipment. So this is a collective. Next. This is the Flatbread Society with future farmers in Oslo, where they looked at the old varieties of wheat growing in Norway. And these varieties of wheat were going extinct. And they recultivated them. But they started the whole project by building a bread oven. So again, to go back to what ignites a community? That's another question you can ask yourselves. What ignites your communities? Because you need to find that ignition. This is the way that Future Farmers did it. Next. We have many alternative food networks, and here's a graphic and communication designer, Chris Croyce, who mapped how the networks work. I don't know whether you map your networks for Phyllis, but I think it's a really good task to do because there's some surprises. I think there's about 10 examples he gives in his essay, and the shape of the network and who's doing what changes quite a lot. So mapping networks. Next. This is a wonderful project done in Vallegrina, also in Trentino, by a design duo called Brave New Alps. And they went to the community, and this might also be relevant to your village, to think 40 years into the future, what kind of livelihood do you want? And they produced a map of future livelihoods. I think this is nice. I would like to map my livelihood. But this is, again, a positive thing I think that you can all think about. A livelihood is more than just work. It's how you live. And I think this has lots of opportunities too, especially when you do it collectively. Next. And this was another part of the Biennale, Alta Care, where we started to look also at the idea of care through different lenses, through indigenous cultures, through marginalized communities, through those who are excluded. If you talk to them about care, it's very different to talking to mainstream thinkers about care. Next. So also we have to think about our landscape. I'm all for hybrids. I think you're hybridizing knowledge in your village. I think we get things crossing over. I'm not talking about agribusiness here, where they promise the next hybrid will produce more, but only if you buy their pesticides and their fertilizer. I'm not talking about that kind of hybrid. I'm talking about the fact that when you hybridize, you don't quite know what comes out of it. Here's a wonderful example using GPS and the special tractor drill. The white lines there were drilled with wildflowers. They actually allowed corridors for animals to go through the field. And it was all done with GPS positioning and the special drill. You could have your edible crop, which was oats, and you could use the wheat, the chaff and the oats, but the wildflowers were there too. This happened 4 years before the first agricultural science laboratory in Switzerland happened to be, started to also experiment with drilling and wildflowers. This was a lone designer who thought, I'm going to change the drill and drill a field like this. And I think it's a wonderful example of how we can think differently. Next. So we need assemblages of care. Assemblages of care bring in all sorts of different kinds of people. They bring in all sorts of different kinds of entities. What Bruno Latour, sadly he died 2 days ago, the anthropologist and philosopher, he would have called them all actants. All these people and living beings, plants, soil, seeds, others, you, we, we're all actants. We all have the possibility of acting and changing what happens next. And when we act together, we affect each other, of course. But that's heading into the territory of Spinoza, so I'll leave that for tonight. So, assemblages of care. Next. I'm nearly there. And I think this is a wonderful quote from Jacques Rancière from his book, The Politics of Aesthetics. We've already had politics mentioned, I'm delighted. But I think this is a kind of civic politics we're talking about here. Each political system, of course, has an aesthetics. The global neoliberal economy has an aesthetics. And it's a regime. And he said, Rancière said, you need to challenge this distribution of the sensible. Who decides what is sensible, what we feel, what we experience, what we materialize? And he says you have to do that through determining what's the articulation between forms of action, production, perception, and thought. So on your network, or networks, how are you thinking about changing the distribution of the sensible? Next. And of course, we need tools. You can email me. We haven't got a website where this is, but this is a tool that we created during COVID. It aims to bring together very, very different kinds of disciplines and very, very different kinds of knowledge. And it's a playful tool where you're asked to work in modes which you don't normally work in. So it's a bit unpredictable too. But we need this unpredictable thinking because the way we're moving at the moment, it's funny, but after COVID, I expected some kind of, whoa, everybody doing crazy things and, you know, trying, experimenting, and silence. Though you might be doing things on your networks, I don't know. But we have to experiment. We're in a time of fragility where we need to experiment. And one way to do that is to have some good tools. I think I'll leave it there. I think that's it. You can get my email. Do look at the PDF on the website. And by the way, who's got the books? Hold them up. One more. Okay, those books are yours.
Thank you, Alastair. It's been really inspiring. I hope we reform or transform into an assemblage of care. That would be great. Let's talk outside. Let's take the conversation outside. I think there are a lot of questions, and we'll try to give answers the next days, but also forever, the next years. Thank you.